teachers will tell you that the thing lacking in maths education at the moment is children's ability to discuss maths and to talk about it, all right? So Numero with the cards allows that.
In order for you to be better, right, you have to learn from those that have already been there, or at least have achieved something that you can aspire to.
My husband and I talked about the fact that we wanted Numero to be preserved. We didn't want Dad's legacy to disappear. And so we made that decision, as I said, to quit my job and to start up Independent Education and Training, which now runs Numero. But what I'm saying is these things happen, and what I've realised is people get it. Be upfront, be honest, own your mistakes. If you've mucked up, okay, own it, deal with it, move on.
In this episode, I sit down with Julie Richards, the director of Numero and a leader in the educational math game space in Australia. A lifelong educator, Julie shares her journey of growing up underneath the auspices of her father, the founder of Numero, and how she eventually took over and guided the company from a game designed initially to solely assist with the effects of a brain disorder to the purpose-driven and innovative national success story it is today. With this game sweeping the country and taking over schools with infectious enthusiasm, she also dives into the holistic, positive impact of Numero and how it is not only helping to improve mathematical ability and confidence, but lives at a much deeper level. An absolutely inspiring story of her way. I have so much respect for the work that she does, and I can't wait to get into this conversation with all of you. Please enjoy this episode of The Way with Cheech Foo, featuring Julie Richards. Julie!
Cheech.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to the podcast series. I must say, I've known you for quite a while now, right?
You have.
Oh my gosh, your story, right, is definitely one that I wanted to tell for quite a while now.
Thank you.
You and what you've been, doing with Numero, right? I've known Numero for actually quite a while. I'm not sure if I told you this, but in primary school, high school, I've actually heard of Numero.
Beautiful.
Already.
That's what we want.
So you've certainly done something really quite amazing, and you and your family. Let's start with Numero, okay? Because
Sure.
that's the one that's really exciting. Tell the viewers more about Numero. Tell us about the story, right? Start from the beginning, Julie. That'd be amazing.
It's quite a story.
Yes.
My father, and it was invented by my dad. So for those that don't know, although I am the face of Numero now, for a long, long time, my dad was that face, okay? Dad was diagnosed back in 1989 with Alzheimer's disease. His instructions from the doctor was to go home, get his affairs in order and wait to die.
Back then, that's
Literally, they were the words he was told. Now, he was devastated. For those that don't know who my father was, Reverend Frank Drysdale, he was well known around the traps. He did amazing things for people. He spent his life looking after people. He'd give the shirt off his back. At the time of his diagnosis, he was actually running the parish of the Uniting Church in Lake Grace, which was the biggest parish in the country covered by car. Anything bigger would be covered by light aircraft. So it was a huge parish. And having been suffering from transient global amnesia, so having bouts of amnesia, and then being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was clear he couldn't do that. So we did have to retire Dad, but we didn't want him to sit around and do nothing. We are also, my mum was amazing with Dad, did not want to lose Dad any sooner than we absolutely had to. So life suddenly took a complete about face. They purchased a house in Redcliffe Street in East Cannington, which was a tiny little, I think it was 2-bedroom house, but it had a massive backyard. And over a period of years, they just dug the whole lot up and redid the whole garden. Okay, that was what he stayed at home and that's what he did. And it was a way of keeping him active physically and something to do because he couldn't do nothing in retirement. Okay, Dad had been a Uniting Church minister, he'd been a teacher, he'd been a sporting coach, he'd always been active, so to do nothing was not an option. When we got in there, Mum did everything she could to delay his Alzheimer's. So that included diet changes, medicines, herbal stuff, any therapy that would delay the disease. But one of the biggest things we did was have my nephews go around after school every afternoon and they would play games with Dad to try to keep his brain mentally stimulated. The more we could keep his brain stimulated, we figured the longer we'd keep him. So that was our logic. So board games, dice games, card games, anything that would keep him thinking. And suddenly, just one day after they had left to go home after school, he just turned to my mum and he said, I've got an idea for a game. And it literally, Numero was born.
Oh.
He grabbed a pack of old cards, like just your normal, diamonds, clubs, spades, hearts pack of cards.
Yep.
Got a marking pen, wrote out what he thought would work, played it a few times with us, thought, yeah, this is all right. We got him some blank cards. He wrote up some homemade sets. And then for the next few months, it was all about trialing it. What can we do? How can we improve it? And this just was like a new lease of life. He just suddenly perked up.
Right.
What
year was this, by the way, so the viewers can understand the timestamp?
1993 was when he first came up with the idea.
1993.
So 4 years in. All right.
Okay.
And having said that, we had no idea what it was going to be. It was only invented to play with his grandchildren. It was just for fun. It was just a bit of maths.
Keep it stimulating. Right.
Yeah. And but it did. We got a buzz out of this and we thought, this is really good. So we actually went off. We got he did a whole pile of handmade cards, packs of them, and we got it tested at ECU in Bunbury with Dr. Paul Swan. So Paul Swan is the guru of maths in WA, if not Australia. If he doesn't know about it, you probably don't need to know about it. Yep. And he trialled it with graduating teachers in a classroom scenario. And he said, look, this is great. It's going to work.
There's something about this game that...
Do it.
Yeah.
So we did it. Yeah, so that was the start of the invention. Dad called it his gift from God because it was never part of the plan. He went on later on to say that he believes this was God's plan for him, that maybe he got Alzheimer's because he was the one that could handle it and something good would come out of it. So that was his way of accepting what had happened to him.
Yeah, the rationale, right?
Yeah, and that sat well with him because something positive had come out of his diagnosis, if you like. So he borrowed money, printed a couple of thousand packs, went round teaching schools, teaching students how to play, sold those packs, paid back the money, and then gifted the game to Alzheimer's WA. So gave the game away to a charity to make money.
I see. Wow.
So he said he didn't need it. He was retiring.
Yep.
Let's give the money to someone who needs it.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's the basis and the background of it.
That's the genesis of it, right? That's really quite amazing. What is it about Numero, right, that is so endearing? I mean, you come to the picture recently, so...
Well, there was another stage. There was like another 20 years in between.
Yeah.
So when that happened, it was made clear to us that Alzheimer's as a charity and a not-for-profit could not do anything with the game. So although they owned it, they couldn't produce it or publicise it because it's not core business. And part of a not-for-profit charity, you have to only do core business or you can risk your status as a not-for-profit. So we needed a publisher because it had got too big for run from home. Dad used to do it out of his back shed. So we got an educational publisher on board, beautiful company. And for 20-odd years, they published it under licence from Alzheimer's, with Alzheimer's WA getting royalties from every product sold. And that was the premise put in place to ensure that they would get some income from the game because otherwise they couldn't get anything. All right. So this is how it was. Now, I went to work for that company and I worked with them for 7 or 8 years. And then the company sold their business. All right. All the directors retired. They sold it. I wasn't entirely, let's be honest, I wasn't entirely happy with the new direction of the company as it was going to be.
Yes.
So, and it came at a time when Alzheimer's were renewing and reviewing all their contracts because they were restructuring themselves and they had actually ended all contracts looking at renewing things. All right. So I approached them and said, look, can I have the license? If I set up my own business to run the publishing of Numero, would you give me the license?
To run it. Yeah.
So that was the conversation that we put in place back in 2017. So they gave me that license and I have that worldwide in perpetuity with the intention that I look after Numero on their behalf.
Yeah.
All right. So now I run Numero. So I took over and I've taken over the publishing, the distribution, and I am also the person that does all the training. I've got a teacher background, so I do all the teaching and the training to schools.
And I think that's something that I wanted to touch upon about because you are no stranger to the academic arena, right? So like, way before you even considered and actually ended up taking over Numero as a licensee. What was your kind of journey like, were you always around academia? Like, were you always gravitating towards academia when even you were young? Were you one of those that always like curious? Because I know you're curious. Like, we've known each other for a while. Like, I think there's a lot of similarities between the both of us. Can you share a little bit more about how kind of that early upbringing really kind of shaped, before we jump into the whole numero,
I was great at school. I was a good student, but I didn't have to try. It was quite easy up until year 10. And I knew that if I did year 11 and 12, hey, I was going to have to start working. So I was one of those students, although I did well, studying wasn't my forte. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was also that group of, how some students go through school never really quite knowing where they want to go. I was that student. My parents said if I wanted to leave school at the end of year 10, I still had to have a trade of some sort. So I went to secretarial college. I was a shorthand typist for years and years and years.
Interesting.
And I can still type and take shorthand at 100 to 120 words a minute. It's still my thing.
Oh, by the way, like a lot of people don't understand how interesting shorthand typist is. Like, I've actually seen a YouTube video where
amazing.
they were writing, right? Like literally what they were writing down was like hieroglyphics to me.
And
it looks like hieroglyphics.
I still
is that what you did?
In a meeting. I still write shorthand.
Yeah.
And I'll get home and write up my notes. I still do it today.
So can you share a little bit more about that? Because I find that very interesting. I find that world very interesting. So how did shorthand come about? Like, is it invented like by some particular person?
Do you know what? I have no idea.
No idea. Okay.
Other than I went to, at the time, was Hartwell Underwood Commercial College. It was the best college around at the time. And I remember it was $2,000 a year for tuition. And mum and dad borrowed the money. So we've come from a poor family. Yeah, and when I say poor, we had everything we needed, but we weren't rich. But I remember mum and dad borrowing the money so I could go to commercial college. All right. Right. That college isn't around anymore, but in the day it was one of the best. And look, I loved it. I took to it like a duck to water. And for years and years and years, I did that. So I graduated that in 1981. I fiddled around in 1984 with doing mothercraft nursing because I did always have a leaning to working with children. So growing up, I had done, taught swimming classes, and I'd done that sort of thing. I'd always been around kids. I taught Sunday school. I liked working with children, but at that point I still hadn't decided where I was heading with it. So I went back to secretarial work and I did that for the next 20 odd years. Okay. Maybe longer. And that's what I did. And I loved it. I was good at it. I loved what I did. And then I had children. And once I had my kids, I was lucky enough that my husband was happy for me to stay home with my kids. I was very much a home mum. All right. Loved being at home with the children. All right. I was one of those weird mums who come school holidays, and I just had coffee this morning with a girlfriend, and we were actually remembering how much we looked forward to school holidays. So quite often you hear parents saying, oh my goodness, at school holidays, what am I going to do? Panic. Yes. I loved them. Yeah. We would find every place we could go. We'd go to museums, we'd go to all sorts of places, all right? So I loved all of that. So then when my kids were at primary school, I went back and did my EA, my education assistance training. And I went on and became a special needs education assistant. Now, during that time, I also worked, because of my secretarial training, as a school officer in schools. So I'd had the educational side, but I also started getting the classroom training. So I then did relief in school offices, and I also did it in the classroom. So that kind of became hand in hand, and I did the two of them, but it meant I was always around the classroom. Yep. And it was during that time that Dad invented Numero, because he actually invented it the year my first son was born. Got it. And published it a year later when my second son was born. So the dates are instilled in my brain. I've got those dates very, very firmly fixed.
That year was a big year.
Yeah. So I've got 3 key dates in my life apart, and they were the year I got married, which was the year my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So they coincided. The year Numero was invented coincided with the birth of my first son. The year Numero was published coincided with the birth of my second son. So they all overlap, which is, I think, kind of cool.
That's pretty cool. Like, the way universe is kind of like, reoriented itself to these 3 dates for you.
So I started doing a lot of volunteer stuff at their school with Numero. And that was a really good trialing point and seeing how it worked and what I could do with it. And then I got a full-time job as an EA. So once I was working full-time as an EA, then I had a deputy principal come up to me one day and say, you should be teaching. And I'd never thought about that. I always said, look, I can't go to uni. I didn't even do year 11 and 12. How the heck can I study? And she said, you can do it. She said, keep working here. You can do it. So I did
potential.
I did my teaching degree externally while I still did EA work full-time. And by this stage, my kids had hit high school. So I did it when the upper primary, probably year 6.
Now, externally, does that mean distance?
Yeah. So I did it all online.
Yep.
And then during school holidays, we would have intensive weeks where we'd have to go into the uni because everyone else was on leave. So we would do our intensive hands-on personal bit. And then I would take leave from my school when I did all my pracs. So, you know, it was a real balancing act for 4 years.
4 years. So that's, was
4
that
years
part-time? 4 years or?
I started off the first semester thinking I'll do it part-time and went, no, this is going to take too long.
Yeah.
And I switched to full-time. So I did it in 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Virtually full-time.
But the reason why I asked is my family too has a bit of an academic streak. So my mum is a teacher at Rossmoyne Primary at the moment.
So I know Rossmoyne Primary very well.
Ah, there you go.
They do play Numero.
Oh, great. I will ask my mum about that. And she actually did extended education from Christmas Island.
Oh, lovely. Yes.
To one of the universities, Murdoch University in Perth. So, and she was saying, yeah, it was part-time about 10 years. But if you do full-time, right, obviously it's quicker. But
full-time should be 4.
Yeah.
But it was 4.5 because I'd started part-time.
Fair enough. Yeah. So, so I completely understand a lot of what you went through because she had like all these documents flying back and forth, paperwork. Was it like your experience? It was full on, right?
I would get the kids home from school, we'd do their homework, we'd have dinner, they'd go to bed and I'd sit for another 4 hours at my laptop or at my computer doing my assignments and reading the books. And I would often do my lectures. I would record them all. So I'd be driving in the car listening to my lectures. Everywhere I went, I had it all on my iPod back in the days of just the traditional iPod, not the phone, the iPod.
Yep.
And I would listen to all my lectures on the iPod. That was how I did my teacher training.
And of course, it succeeded. So all went well.
I delayed my final graduation by 3 months because it happened right at the time of my dad's passing. So my one regret was I actually hadn't qualified when he passed away because he was so excited about me being a teacher.
He was just so
because he loved education. Yeah. But he knew I was going to finish it.
Yeah.
And he used to read all my assignments before I sent them in. He used to get a real kick out of it. So even when his health was deteriorating, he still wanted to read my assignments. Yeah. And that was something that kept him going as well. Because we were told a year or 2 and we did keep him for 23 years.
And I guess, that was my next question as well, right? Like, was it sudden at that time or was it kind of like a gradual and then?
Well, I think because he kept so mentally fit and people underestimate the importance of mental fitness. I'm such an advocate of it now. I've seen it. And that was thinking we only had a year or 2, me thinking he'd never know my children. Well, we kept him for 23 years. The last 2 or 3 years were really tough. As long as he had my mum prompting him, he could cope. Mum and dad were thick as thieves. Like they were a duo. They're
always together. They're always next to each other.
They never fought. They never argued about anything. They were always a pair. Whatever you did, they always had each other's back. Mm. And that was just as well because with his disease, he needed her so badly. And
it's very afflicting, right?
But she was fantastic. But that's also, she had a huge part in why he stayed with us for so long. And he was really thrilled about my teacher training. He thought that was great. And he knew by then I had already taken on Numero as far as I was working with that publishing company doing Numero for them.
Yeah.
So he'd seen that part of it. He hadn't seen me take it on completely on my own.
Okay.
But he had seen me working with it full time.
Look, great segue, right? Because my next query was that what was your involvement, right? Kind of leading up to that.
That was slow developmental. So when Dad...
Edgy.
Yeah. Well, when he first did it, it was working out from the back of his house and all the family was involved. Whoever was up would go around and we'd take turns in collating cards, so, because they all used to come to him in big sheets and we'd pop them all out of the sheets and we'd have a pile of the 1 reds and pile of the 2 reds and pile of the 3 and we'd go around and we'd walk around pool table collating the cards and putting them into boxes that a gentleman from his church who was a blind gentleman could fold the boxes.
Oh.
And he'd have piles of boxes and then we'd fill the boxes. Like it was a huge manual task and it was all done from there until it got taken over by the publishing company because it just got too big from home. So, but in those days, I was significantly involved in getting it printed originally, so I helped him get we went around finding people. It was very hard to get cards printed in WA.
Is that right?
Printing cards is a specialty print and not many people will do it. And I pushed to get a little local company to give it a go. Mm. And so they printed it for a few years until this publishing company took it over. And then they actually took it offshore because it was cheaper to print offshore, which I get, but I'm big on WA and I've brought it back.
Okay.
But so that we can talk about later. But,
Yes.
it did. So I was involved in all that stage of it early.
Okay.
And then it was more, I used to do a lot of editing with Dad. I used to do a lot of helping. And then Dad introduced competitions, and I had a sister, Roz, who she used to help Dad with one side of the competition, and I used to do the scoring, which was the other component. And so we did a lot of stuff with them. And that's not to say other family members didn't get involved, because they all did, whether it be collating, whether it be running around, picking stuff up. Family were always helping.
To some degree, yes.
Every member of the family.
On board.
And I'm one of 6. So there was a lot of family involved, including nephews and nieces who would help. There was a lot of that. Until, as I said, once it went to the publishing company, obviously there was no need for any of that. So, but Mum and Dad still did the promotion of it for many years until they then employed my sister, Roz, who did have a teaching background. Okay. She hadn't taught much as a teacher because she got married and went off to the farm and became a farmer's wife and worked on the farm. There was a different setup to what I had. But she came up and she did a lot of work with Mum and Dad till I did my training. And whilst I was still involved and still doing the competitions, once I was trained, I then went and worked with that publishing company, and then that was when I got more heavily involved. And
Got it.
Roz settled back with her family and off in the bush, and I sort of took over that role.
Yeah. And that was like, what, 2-3 years before it was actually handed over to you, the licensee?
7 years, 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was working at that publishing company in 2011 when Dad passed away.
Yeah.
And up until probably 2008, he was still doing a bit of stuff, but I'd already started working with Alzheimer's, with the publishing company then.
Publishing company. Okay.
So we moved on from there.
Yeah.
And then I worked full-time with them doing Numero and a little bit of other, selling stuff, repping stuff with them, because obviously Numero was not a full-time job with them at that point.
Yes.
It was a component of their work.
Yes.
And then when it all changed, I went, you know what? I'm going to make this a full-time job.
Yeah.
So now it's bigger because I go to more schools and I've got more things involved in it, and I've grown the product. But it kind of came as a gradual development where my sister was there, then she moved on, I took over. And look, she still comes and helps me with the competitions, as have some other family members. I've got nieces that have helped. I've got my sons help.
Yep.
All different times they've all helped in different roles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's family business for you, right?
It's a legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So competition started which year? When did all the
testing me? Okay. My primary school competition this year will be, I think, the 28th year of competition.
So that's what, 1996?
Yeah, something like
that.
That
would
be
about
around
right.
around about that era. Yeah, so 1996 would be about right.
And where did it start? What was the first school that you guys started with?
Well, the very first school that won it was North Woodvale Primary School. I can remember that much. Okay. Should have bought my trophy in to look at it. But look, but it was small. It was just an event.
Yep.
And then it grew. It was then a North and a South heat, and then he'd have a grand final. And that's just progressively grown over the last 28 years. This year, I have 13 heats in a grand final and I have over 100 schools involved.
Wow.
So it's really, really growing.
That has been.
He also trialled a secondary one.
Yes.
Which again was a one-off event.
Yep.
That is now 3 heats in a grand final.
3 heats and how many schools for the secondary?
That's, what is it this year? I think it's about 20, 22, 23 schools this year. 23 schools. So that's just slowly growing. Wow. And I've got a couple more schools keen to come in next year.
Yeah.
So because that's the first heat, that competition starts in end of this month.
Okay. So it's every year roughly about July, August.
The secondary is the end of July, early August. Yep. And the primary one, I have my country heats at the end of third term. So first week of September, roughly. Yeah. And then all my metro heats start week 2 of term 4. So mid-October. And then we have a grand final.
Okay.
So at the end of October, beginning of November.
Feels like it's a really large undertaking, right? To run these competitions.
It is huge. Look, I don't know that people actually understand the work behind it, but I absolutely love it. Yeah. But it is a huge task. I mean, the day after the competition finishes, I've already put up dates and changed everything and spoken to my sponsors and already started planning for the next year. Yeah. As soon as one finishes,
that's how quick it is.
It takes the year to do it. But look, I love it, and it's a give back. Dad did it as a way of thanking the school. So there was never It's not a financial thing. I don't make any money from those
Oh,
competitions.
so you don't charge for the competition at all?
Up until 2 years ago, I haven't charged at all.
Okay.
There is a very small registration fee. It's $60. And that's per school. Doesn't matter how many teams they bring in. It is, and that just simply covers some of the administrative stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It's not my time.
Yeah.
It's not my days. I still work. Those days are voluntary. I don't make any income from those. And I have a team of volunteers, ex-teachers, ex-EAs that all have retired and they come back and help me.
Got it.
So I have a beautiful team I've got about probably 7 or 8 in total that alternate depending on the dates and who's available. And from that core group are my volunteers for my events.
Okay. And it takes you like all the way, not just in Perth, right? It takes you all the way across the state.
I have heaps.
Right? Because you keep telling me about these travels that you guys do. Like you are everywhere,
Well,
Julie.
the competition has heats in Esperance, Geraldton, Bunbury and Kalgoorlie.
Okay.
So last year was the first year in Kalgoorlie, so that was a growth. We went from 12 heats to 13 heats to bring Kalgoorlie into the event.
Yeah.
So that's another new region. But as far as Numero itself, look, just in the first, July? So the first 6 months of this year, I've spent time in Newman, Kalgoorlie, Port Hedland, Darren, Northam. Look, there's probably others. That's just off the top of my head. I travel wherever it takes me. Every couple of years I try to do a big trip up north and I try to get to as many of the remote Aboriginal communities as I can. I know that was a vision of my dad's and it's been one of mine to get to some of the remote schools, and they are beautiful schools. And I've been all the way up to Kununurra with that.
How is that experience like? Like, kind of going into these communities, like, was something that you're just so proud of?
They were amazing. They were absolutely amazing. And those trips, my husband's actually taken leave and come with me. He drives with me. He's gone and got his education clearance and his working with children clearance. So he comes into the classrooms with me and works with me, which I will say a lot of the remote communities love because they love having a male role model as well. So when we go into these little communities, they love that there's the two of us. They love that it's a husband and wife thing. They like that family connection as well because Indigenous communities are very family oriented. And so they like that. And that's always been a big part of me. Now, you're just talking about your mum being Christmas Island and that sort of thing. Well, my grandparents were missionaries at One Arm Point.
Oh, okay.
So going up to Beagle Bay last year or 2 years ago was fantastic because I can remember going there to visit my grandparents when I was 7. So there's a lot of this sort of thing. And going into these little communities, I went to a community in Pernalulu where very small private school.
Where is Pernalulu?
It's Frog Hollow. It's opposite. Here's how I find my way there, okay? Go up the Great Northern Highway.
Yeah.
And you get to the Bungles turn off on your right.
Okay.
Go left and you're in Frog Hollow, which is Pernalulu.
Okay. That's actually quite straightforward.
It's actually quite easy to find.
Yeah.
They were a beautiful community. Now, we stayed in one of their dongas overnight before we headed off to another community the next morning. And I remember we'd finished at the school. I don't know, we did some work with the staff. We'd finished around 4:00. And, of course, we were staying overnight. There was no shops. So we were just hanging out. And a group of kids just come up to us. Would you like us to show you around?
Oh.
And these beautiful children took us down and showed us their watering area where they go swimming. They asked us if we wanted to go swimming, that they would bless us because they had to give us a blessing before that we entered their waterways. And, look, we weren't going to go swimming because we knew there'd been a crocodile around the area. So we passed on that one.
Smartly.
But they were beautiful and they showed us some of their bush medicine. They told us what they did with this plant and that plant. They were just, and the children are delightful. They'd just grab our hands and off we'd go and we'd be climbing trees and climbing rocks and just they're so welcoming, these communities. And to take Numero into these areas where maths is a problem, it's something they need work on. And these communities, they love cards. And cards is a really beautiful way for them to have fun with their families. We do a lot of community workshops up there where we get the parents and grandparents in as well. So they learn to play so they can play at home with their children. It's giving them something else to play at home, not just at school. So it's a whole approach, whole family, whole community approach rather than just a school task.
Yeah.
So it's pretty special in those communities. I love them. And you can probably see if you're looking at my face.
Yes.
I love these.
Oh, everyone's looking at your face.
And I cannot wait to go back again. But we leave it every couple of years to make it viable for them.
Of course.
Because it is an expensive trek up there because it costs a lot to get up there.
Fair enough. So, that's kind of like, a credit to the Numero itself, right? Because the game itself is just so smart, so clever, right? I find that it's just so unique.
It's so simple.
Yes.
And if you keep to there's only 3 rules. This whole
Yeah,
game. There's
please.
only 3 rules.
Let's do it.
Just don't
Okay.
don't break the 3 rules. If you don't break the 3 rules and what you do is mathematically correct, you can do it. Like there's a lot of open-ended opportunities, and people think of maths as boring and it's not creative. Numero allows maths to be creative.
Okay.
Because you can play with it.
So let's say, for example, like a layperson that's never heard of Numero before, right? How would you describe the game? How does it work, right? And
okay.
I love it.
It's a mental maths card game that is suitable for the age of 3 to adult. Okay. Now, I can guarantee that because my children started at 3 and my grandchildren started at 3. My newest 3-year-old grandchild, because I've got 4 now, but my third one has just hit 3, he's just started playing it. And we play with numbers 1 to 10, and he just matches. He's learning the processes of the game more so than the maths when you first start. You're teaching the children how to play the game. And that can be as simple as any card game, taking turns, putting their cards in order, number recognition. So early years, it's important for them to understand what a number is. What does it look like? What does a 5 look like? What does an 8 look like? You know, when they count the dots. Now, as a teacher, I can tell you there's so many strategies and so many skills that they need to learn in kindy and preschool, all right? And in those years, they learn that number recognition. So as soon as they see an 8, they know it's an 8 because you recognise the number. As an adult, you recognise the number. Kids have to learn that. They need to learn what we call subitizing. Now, just imagine, here's a picture for your audience, okay? Imagine you're looking at a number 5 in dots. You will always see 2 dots at the top, 2 at the bottom, and 1 dead in the centre. That is what we call the array of dots that signifies 5. So even if there's no number 5 on that array, you know the second you look at it that it's a 5. You don't count the dots. You know what the image looks like. That is a skill children also need to learn. So Numero fits all of those as well. So it has number recognition. It has subitizing, because that is called subitizing, knowing what it looks like without the number.
Got it.
All right, which is why when we were designing the cards, we didn't do any fancy designs. The designs match the educational process of children. So it fits all the pedagogies that they need in school. Then we have things like trusting the count, which again probably sounds completely weird, but it means if you've ever worked with a little child and you say, what number is this? And they'll sit there and they'll count the dots and they'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's like, great, what number is it? And they'll go, I don't know. All right, let's count it again. The last number I say is how many there is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what number is it? Oh, it's 6. See, believe it or not, they're skills that children need to learn. Playing with your children young is so important. All right. Now, Numero will consolidate all those things if you can start your children young.
And is that 3 years old? Is that like a
It's not. You can start earlier, but I started at 3.
Okay.
But I have, some people think, they've got to be older to be able to play cards. No, they don't. When I started, my kids played with 1 to 5 because they were the numbers they knew.
Small numbers.
Then I went to 8. Then I went to 10, 12, 15, which is high as Numero goes. It goes up to number 15 as far as the cards themselves. All right. So as they learnt their numbers, I increased the difficulty of the game by including more cards. All right. So that's for the early years. And then they progress to addition. Then they'll progress to subtraction, multiplication and division, fractions with a numerator of 1, which is the top number. So they are just like an addition card. Then we go on to other fractions, more complex fractions, mixed numerals, and then into indices. So square roots, cubed, all that sort of stuff. All right. So it goes right up to what, now those square roots and cubes, they're in the year 6 curriculum. But it still very much fits the early secondary. So year 7, 8, 9, it's still very, very applicable. So this goes right through school-wise to probably up to year 10. Okay. But I've also got year 11, 12 students who are doing the vocational programs who need to build their general use of maths or just general lifestyle skills. No matter what you train, you need maths. And what Numero does is it underpins the basic number facts. So all of those things that I just said are your basic number facts and use of. It also brings in fluency, so being able to do it quickly, without having to stop and think. It becomes automatic. So if I said to you, what are 6/8?
48.
You didn't have to think about it. So that will help with tables. It will help with understanding patterns and connections. If I see an 8, I know I could divide that by 2 or a 4 because the patterns fit.
Correct.
So there's that. There's reasoning, being able to explain why something works the way it does and being able to explain that. When kids get to high school or upper primary and they solve a problem and the teacher says, well, how did you do it? And they'll say, it doesn't matter, here's my answer. They've got to be able to explain it. Numero allows them to explain what they're doing. It makes it very clear, very step by step. Problem solving. These are my answers. How am I going to make all those cards in the centre equal the answer in my hand? And I've got to manipulate things using all my knowledge of maths, all those other skills that we just talked about, put them all together and come up with an answer.
Tools at your disposal, right?
Whatever's there, manipulate them, use them to create what you want it to create. And it's amazing suddenly the maths that these kids are doing. I've had parents say, oh, my kids can't do that. And I've said, give me a minute. We've pulled out the cards. I've told them the basics. And they've just sat there and they didn't know my kids could. Give them a chance, let them go.
Yeah.
And know that kids will get ahead of their parents and get ahead of their teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great construct, right?
Yeah.
Which to actually
builds progressively.
Yes. Yeah. It enables that potential, right, to be unleashed. Like, you think that, he or she might not be able to do it, never have shown any potential at all.
And I have had people say to me, oh, I'm no good at maths. But I've sat down and taught them numero. And suddenly, I didn't know I could do that.
Why do you think society, right, like as a whole, why do so many people keep saying that their maths are
It's one of those things
great.
that's hung over from school. So as an adult, and it comes from adults, it comes from parents, okay, where a parent has struggled and they may have genuinely struggled at school with maths. Now, that could have been because it could have been as simple as an undiagnosed dyslexia, undiagnosed other issues. It could have been maths was just not their thing. Their skill was in art or their skill was in English. And that's normal. We all have a gift. Don't ask me to draw a picture. I can draw a stick figure and that's it. All right? I have no creative skill whatsoever. But ask me to read or spell or do maths, anything that was structured was my forte. All right? But you will get parents that say, I'm no good at maths. And what happens, unfortunately, is when their child comes home and can't do something, oh, don't ask me, I'm no good at maths. So what happens is when that child has even the smallest hiccup, they'll go, oh, I'm just like my mum, I'm no good at maths. And it transfers down the generations. And one of the things I used to say in parent meetings as a teacher when I had a child that struggled, and I would have the parent come in, oh, look, yeah, that's an area I struggled with. And I said, well, can you please stop telling that to your child?
I think this notion of what we call limiting beliefs is actually very
dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous, very influential, very detrimental.
Very limiting.
Right. As you know, thoughts does become actions.
Yes.
And actions becomes habits.
You tell the child long enough that they can't do something
and they won't.
And they will never do it. You tell them, hey, if we try, we might get there. They just might push themselves that little bit further. Don't give up on any kids, no matter what their situation. So that's a big thing for me. And that's why I like Numero as well. It's used in English intensive language centres because it helps the kids learn to speak mathematical terms and numbers in English. It's used in ed support centres. I've had families braille the cards.
Right.
I've got some schools who will use big A5 versions of the cards because I sell big, what we call demonstration cards. And I've gone to schools where children with limited vision will play with the big cards instead of the little cards, but still play it.
Got it.
Everybody can play numero. I've never yet found a situation where we can't play numero. Never yet.
As long as the numerical language is the same and it is universal.
Stick the same. Yep.
Right. It is universal. Yeah. It applies to everywhere.
Well, I actually met a young lad on Friday.
Yep.
In fact, just gone. Last day of term.
Okay.
I was doing a relief day.
Yep.
We won't discuss schools, but I was doing a relief teaching day because I had a day off and I was at the school. And I had a young boy, he's fresh out from China, very limited English. And we were playing numero. And there was a young girl in the class who could speak Chinese as well, or Mandarin, sorry.
Yep.
My apologies. And she was translating every now and then when there was a word he didn't understand. But whenever I was saying 7 + 3, he just came out 10. He knew the English word for the numbers. He recognised the numbers and we were playing. We could not talk to each other.
So there's barely any communication
We had
happening.
no understanding, but we were saying the maths because the maths is a universal language. So the maths doesn't matter whether you speak English. You can still play it. So, and that actually happened to me on Friday. So, because I'd never met this young boy before. He was new to the school. He'd been here 2 weeks.
Wow.
So he was brand new and we were playing numero.
There you go.
So, yeah, it's definitely one of those things that should be for everybody.
Yeah.
And it can be for adults. Anything that keeps your brain moving, We'll help your dementia. We'll help slow down any of those symptoms. The reason Dad stayed with us for 23 years was because his brain was so mentally stimulated for so long.
That's that's proof of anything, right?
Yeah.
So started off with a couple of thousand. How many are in circulation right now? Like, what's the number? What are we looking at?
Hundreds of thousands.
100,000 packs.
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I print them now, as I said to you before, I brought the printing back, which allows me to actually print in slightly smaller print runs, so I don't have to store it quite so heavily. But I print 40, 50 class sets at a time, which is 40 lots of 15. So I'll print 400 to 500, packs of cards at a time. And they, every couple of weeks I'm printing more of those. They are still out in schools everywhere. And it's exciting. I go into a school, and I'll find, you've got Numero in your cupboard. Are you using it? And it's great.
I mean, running an organization like this obviously takes a lot of talent, a lot of time, right? And I know for a fact that a large majority of our listeners and viewers are entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Right? So, and then a subset of that will also be not just entrepreneurs, but also family business legacy owners.
Yes.
So if I were to ask you, what is your way in how you will manage to succeed, right? From taking over licensing 17 to what it is now. What's your way? How did you?
It was scary.
Yeah.
And it was tough. I made the decision. My husband and I talked about the fact that we wanted Numero to be preserved. We didn't want Dad's legacy to disappear. And so we made that decision, as I said, to quit my job and to start up Independent Education and Training, which now runs Numero. Now, having started that up, and it was just me, I still have no employees, or it is still very much just me. And I did have family members say, look, do you need a hand? Do you want this? And I did make a tough decision early, and that was that I did not want to mix family with business as far as me as a business owner.
Right.
Because I've heard of families where money has come between them. And I'm very close to my siblings, and they've always supported me and still continue to do so. I speak to most of them most weeks, so we are in contact all the time. But I did not want to have money get in the way of family. So that was one decision we made early on.
How did that, if you don't mind?
It was a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. It was a conversation. I mean, I had one of my siblings came to me and said, look, do you need some money to help you get started? Because obviously as an entrepreneur, everyone knows the biggest problem is startup capital. Okay. And look, extra money would have been nice. But that was when, as I said, my husband and I sat down and we said, you know what? We don't want this to affect any of our relationships. Our kids had great relationships with their cousins and their aunties and their uncles.
Don't want anything to change.
We don't want that to change.
Yeah.
And we know that sometimes when money comes into it, it can affect those relationships. So we made a really considered decision. And we went back and said, look, thank you, but no,
Not taking anything, not just from you. Just
from nobody, flat across the board, this is our call. So that was the first big decision we made. And then my next decision was setting up my distributors and setting up all that sort of stuff. Now, I was lucky that I already knew, because of being in the industry, I knew people that could help me. And I had some very, very close relationships with some of these people. A couple of my early on contracts were handshake agreements.
Wow.
They were not even written. I don't necessarily recommend that, but they worked for me.
Yep.
All right. And we just worked beautifully together.
Is it because there was a lot of trust in the relationship?
Absolutely. And one particular one was my distributor initially, who I gave sole distributorship to. He was hugely supportive of me going out on my own and helped me in every way he could. And we had a deal. He's now no longer in the industry. We're still mates. So I can honestly say everyone I've dealt with in that respect, I am still on really good speaking terms with. And that was one of the other things I always said. Dad was one of those people that everybody knew that even if you didn't always agree with him, everything he did always came from the heart. Everything he did always came for the right reason.
From a good place.
And was always intended to help.
Yeah.
Okay, there was no question. That does not mean he was perfect. It does not mean he didn't make mistakes. What it does mean is that everything was done with the right intention. So we also made the very clear intention that Numero was going to be a company that remained morally and ethically the way it should be. So he'd given the game to Alzheimer's. That relationship has remained. I have a wonderful relationship with them as a charity. We do a lot of things together. I support their events, their Walk to Remembers, their dementia symposiums, all coming up, and they'll be all over my social media. I support everything they do. They support everything I do. They come to my grand finals. We have a great relationship because they get royalties from everything I sell. So obviously that helps them and they help me where they can. Now, having made that decision, I then went out and made everything I could be a WA company. So my printers, my accountant, my computer people, even now recently, and we'll get on to later probably, is a digital version, my Numero Digital.
Yes, we will talk about that.
That is also a local company. I did not go offshore for it. Even my marketing company, everything is WA, where possible, family businesses. All right, that's how Dad would have liked it, and that's what I've done. All right, I do believe as part of that legacy, I have to respect what he created in the way that he created it and what he would have wanted out of it. And whilst, yes, I've added my tweaks and my side to things, and I've changed some of the terminologies I've changed because obviously I've done a much later teaching degree than what he had, and things have changed. So I've updated and modified and corrected and tweaked. But in essence, the game itself has never changed. The rules have never changed.
Yeah.
And I've had people say to me, why don't you do this? I said, no, does not need changing. What Dad did was perfect. And I've actually not changed the game itself ever. How I teach it, some of the tips and some of the tools and the strategies I use may have changed, but the game itself has not changed. The logo has not changed. And I will never change the logo. That was Dad's logo. I've changed the packaging. I've changed how some things look. But in essence, the game is the same. And I think that's something that actually I'm really proud of, but it also means my family's still proud of it because they still come and help.
They still connect, they associate with it. Yep.
Because it's still that game.
Still the same game.
My nephews, I've got one of my niece's children, so a great nephew, has told his mum that one day he wants to work with me and do Numero. So this has still gone down further generations. I've got a grandson who's now 6, who from the age of 4 has helped me sort cards for competitions. And he comes in and he, Nana, any Numero jobs today? So Numero is ingrained in our DNA. And that's what I want it to be. So a big part of setting up was that. So that's the legacy part. I wanted it to maintain all of that. Financially, as I said, I made that tough decision early. And I'm lucky that my husband has been very, very supportive.
Bootstrap, man. That's it. You do what you got to do, right? You probably had to scratch and find all these different ways to survive.
There'd be things I'd want to do and I'd go, not for another couple of months. That one can go on hold. That's not urgent. I'll do it this way for now. When I'm ready, then I can bring that in. And there was a lot of that along the way. When I wanted to change even flyers, don't really like that. Oh, I've got to suck that up for another couple of months, and then I'll change it, And they were decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
And there's been a few tough ones. There's been a couple of times where I've gone to a supplier and said, look, can you give me another week or 2? I'm just waiting on some invoices to be paid to me. That's the cash flow stuff.
Cash flow stuff.
And early days, that was tight. It was really tight. It still is at times, especially now because I've actually outlaid a lot of my income on my next investment, which is growing to continue the legacy.
Yeah.
And as I say, but all along the way, I've been very, very lucky. One thing I will say to anybody listening, starting out a business, surround yourself with good people. I've got people that are massive mentors to me, and every school holidays, there's 2 or 3 people I always make sure I catch up with.
Yep.
And we'll talk about how the last term's gone. And sometimes I'll say to him, have you tried this? Oh, no, there's an idea. And I'll go off and I'll look at it. And sometimes I'll come back and say, no, it's not going to work. And other times I'll go, that was a great idea. I'm doing that and it's made such a difference, So you need those people.
And I would say actually not just good people, but also smarter and more successful people.
Yeah, don't be afraid to be the dumb one.
No, I mean...
I mean that in fun. Don't be afraid to be the one that doesn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go into a room, right, and my thinking is if you go into a room and you're the smartest person in that room...
You got nothing to learn.
Or that, and you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, good point.
Why are you in that room?
Because you need to learn too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. In order for you to be better, right, you have to learn from those that have already been there or at least have achieved something that you can aspire to.
And in saying that, keep training. So I still go to workshops. I still go to training sessions and pick up other little tips, not just about maths, but sometimes it's about the business. So there's the maths side of the Numero and how to teach it. So I still do teacher professional learning. But I also go in and do learning about, I just did a little thing the other week. I went to a session where they were talking about IP, securing my IP, when I do other things. I've done financial business training to try to get a bit more of an understanding. I've got an amazing accountant who every now and then I say, look, I'm stuck on something, and she'll come around and we'll spend a couple of hours working on how do we look at this? What's a better way to handle this? How can we make this easier so it doesn't become a headache at the end of every 3 months when I've got to do my BAS statement?
Oh, yeah, the good old BAS.
So, but I got the right people, and I'm happy to pay for it. If they've got knowledge that I need to learn, that is not a waste of money. It's an investment. And sometimes you have to invest in what you're going. And that was something I actually had to learn. So I kept saying, no, I can do this on my own, and realised, no, I can't do this on my own.
So you're kind of saving, but realize actually, right?
Sometimes you have to spend.
Yeah, wisely, right? For something that you yourself can't do or never know how to do, right? You'll never be an accountant.
No, but also, some of my designing, as I said before, I can't draw a stick figure. So I needed people to give me advice. I hired people to give me, branding ideas, to give me, social marketing ideas. Because, hey, I'm 59. Social media is not my forte.
So new.
I've come into it later, and I'm getting better.
Yeah.
But that's through listening, learning, and getting support. And don't be afraid to get support. That was a big one. Never
stop, right? Never stop asking. Never stop asking questions. Be curious. Always figuring out the whys behind everything.
That's probably my biggest problem, actually. That is actually a downfall. I never cut off. That is probably a downfall of working for yourself.
Yes.
No matter what you're doing, even when you're at home, you're still thinking of it. Sometimes you have to make yourself cut off as well for your own sanity.
Switch off for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you've got to have your downtime,
Yeah.
Game of pool and a record and a glass of wine.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say, how does Julie Richards, spend her downtime?
Julie Richards relaxes with a glass of wine, a game of pool and a vinyl record.
Yeah.
All right. Best investment we ever made while my children were still at school, because my eldest wanted a pool table. When he moved out of home, the pool table stayed. All right.
And that gets frequently used.
Every weekend. Yeah. So, but that is actually important. It's also important to sit down and have your dinner and not answer your phone. Because I do tend to answer my phone, and teachers will vouch for the fact that they will get emails from me at midnight, because I do answer at all times of the day and night. That's fine if I'm sitting watching telly or doing something in my phone. I'm happy to answer it. But you need to actually cut off. So I cut off at dinner time, and I don't do stuff. Yeah, that's husband and wife time.
Be in the moment,
yeah,
as they say.
And school holidays, babysitting days with my grandkids.
Yes.
When my grandkids are there, I'm not working. I'm playing with my grandkids, and you do have to have that because otherwise you will burn out. And I've got a few friends who've actually done businesses and have just made it too hard for themselves.
Because if you're always on, right, your brain just gets so intense, right? It's just like a pressure cooker.
And you actually start forgetting things because you're putting too much in there. And I will openly admit I forget stuff because I have too much going in my brain. It's like, okay, I've just added something, so something else had to go. So I'm a big list writer. Absolutely. I live off lists.
I mean, I tell you, human beings forget stuff. I think our memory is so malleable. I tell my team, right, if it's not in the Google Calendar, it doesn't exist.
I do tell people that. If it's not in my calendar,
it doesn't exist.
Phone, I'm not there. And I'll say, do you want me to write it down?
No,
on a piece of paper? No. If it's in there, I'm there.
No, send me an invite, right? And if it's there,
yes, it's in my calendar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know that.
Yeah.
This meeting was in my calendar, Cheech.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Thank you. So I will say very clearly that you are not alone in that. You are definitely not the exception. I think it's just universal, and just being very prepared, right?
Another thing I've learned, thinking of starting out, don't be afraid to be wrong.
Big one.
Because early on, I was so conscious of never mucking up, was so scared of being wrong or sending something incorrectly or doing something. As long as I've never sent an email that I've regretted what I've said or said the wrong thing to someone, might have sent it to the wrong person, and I've done a couple of those recently. And I would just send an email saying, so sorry, that wasn't meant for you. Can you delete it? I mean, there was nothing confidential in it. It was a silly mistake. But what I'm saying is these things happen. And what I've realised is people get it. Be upfront, be honest, own your mistakes. If you've mucked up,
Yes.
okay, own it, deal with it, move on. Because that was something, as I said, I found that hard at the beginning.
I think that's important.
And I stressed over errors. Like I would get really upset with myself. How could I have done
Like
that?
you overthink, like, oh man, why did I do that?
In the bigger picture, it didn't really matter. And that person understood that it was just a human error.
Yeah.
But that was another thing, because I was so focused on getting everything right, starting this business, being perfect, that actually put so much stress on myself.
No business is perfect.
Yeah, but it took a while to get that to sink in.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. No. Absolutely. I know.
I still try to be.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, clear. I mean, I'm a Virgo, by the way. So my zodiac's a Virgo. And for those who do believe, right? Like, Virgos do have this habit of being a perfectionist. So I completely understand what
I'm
you
just
mean.
picturing my son now because he's a Virgo.
Yeah.
Okay, carry on.
and I mean, my wife can attest to this as well, and anyone around me. So I completely empathize with that, right? And then you realize actually 80% of the things that, you thought was important actually did not matter.
No.
It's the 20%, the minority, like certain things like, okay, yes, that one, you have to put the right time and effort to sort that out. The other 80, the rest of it, it's okay. There's not much you can go wrong with it. And if you did it wrong, it doesn't really affect.
No. And the other thing I learned with emails was I always reread before I hit send.
Yeah.
Because I would type an email and I'd read it. Geez, how did I write that? So I always reread.
Yes.
Because you often think there's a word there that's not.
Yes.
Or it's autocorrected,
I've done that
especially
too
with
as
text
well.
messages.
Yes, I've done that too as well.
So I must admit I'm very good now, and it takes a fraction longer, but geez, it's a lot better than having to correct it later.
That extra 3 seconds just to look it over again, right? Saves a lot of headache.
So there's things like that I've really got good at. I always recheck everything I send now,
Yes.
But, look, there's pitfalls, but I find most of the pitfalls, like say operator error, they're my fault.
Yep.
They're because I've overthought something or I've stressed over something that didn't really need it. And it's, what's the old saying, don't sweat the
small stuff.
The small stuff.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And it actually is true.
It is true.
As long as you've got your big focus thing, yes, you got to do these little steps along the way, but you'll get there. And I have also discovered some of my long-term goals have taken longer than I thought. I underestimated where I would be by certain deadlines, that was kind of a rude awakening. But yeah, so try not to expect too much too soon.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny because I was just also kind of ruminating about this particular part whereby I think we tend to always overestimate what we can do in the short term, say for a year, but underestimate what we can do in the long term, say for 5 years or 10. Do you feel that way? Like the more I go through life and business, right? The more I realize that is so true.
Well, I've panicked over a lot of these little things. And then I look back and I go, well, actually, what have I done since I started up on my own?
Amazing.
Numero is bigger than it ever was. My competitions are bigger than it ever was. I've now developed the app. It's in different schools in the eastern states. It's in I've got little schools in France and, Poland and Germany and Ireland that play Numero.
Yes.
Only small little pockets at the moment, but it's giving me avenues. I'd love Numero to grow even bigger, and I've still got dreams. I've still got goals that, I want a distributor, in Ireland. I want a distributor in New Zealand, these sorts of things. I'd love it to grow. Yeah. But I've also been more realistic about it. Whereas I thought, someone shows interest and I get all excited and think, this is going to happen. Come on, step back. Even if it does, it's going to take a couple of years, you know? Yeah. So I've learned to make those adjustments to my excitement. Yes. And that's sort of toning down my excitement because I have that habit of getting a bit excited about something and then realising it's actually not going to happen that quick.
Understand.
And so that was sort of one, I did expect different turnovers and different, but hey, what do they say? Most small businesses, what's the percentage that fail in 5 years?
It's like 90%. I think it's a very high number.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
clearly,
I think that's success. I'm
very,
still here.
very successful. You definitely, made that mark.
But that was one of the things that I remember thinking, because I had people say, "Oh, it's not going to work," and it does.
Always naysayers. There's always naysayers, Julie. Right?
They weren't my family, and they weren't my people that knew me close. Yeah, knew that I could do it.
Yeah.
They probably had more faith in me than I did, but you know.
The other people around. Yeah.
So,
and
they're still the same people.
That's why inner conviction is the most important. Like, it doesn't matter what other people think. Like, if you truly, genuinely believe that, you are able to do it, right? And you are willing to see it through, right? Not to say that, you have to stick it over for 20 years and lose a whole bunch of money. No, I'm not asking you to do that. Please don't take that advice.
Not to the ridiculous degree.
Correct. No. But, to actually really back yourself, right? Yeah. Because that's actually what it is in the end. Like, no matter how big a company is, right? In the end, it all comes back to that one person.
It's belief, and it's knowing your product, knowing that you know it better than anybody else.
Yeah.
And that you are the right person for the job.
Yeah.
That took a while. Now I believe it.
I know you believe.
Now it's ingrained in me, and I say Numero is in my DNA now, and it is in my kids' DNA. Like, it's going to continue now, and I know it will because I know they'll look after it, which is the plan.
Yeah.
But I did need a lot of support early on, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Yeah.
But that's actually those are great. Like, I mean, you've already mentioned so many of these various gems of truth, right? So I think the listeners and viewers will take a lot out.
But they come naturally once you start doing it.
Yes.
It actually comes almost by osmosis. It just happens. Like,
and then discipline, right?
Yeah.
Just keep at it, right? So you mentioned about like different countries like Ireland, France, right? Like, let's talk about the next chapter, right? So tell me about this digital version. Tell me about what the next plans are for Numero. Give me the...
Oh, this is my next excitement.
Yes. Give me the vision.
All right. The vision at the moment.
Yeah.
I've created what's called Numero Digital is what we're kind of calling it. But it's a digital app, and it is Numero in a digital form. All right.
Very cool.
Now, there's 3 components of this. So if you download this app, you will get Numero Solitaire, so you can play on your own. Numero, we call it single player, but it's you against the computer, so you against the bot. Okay. Or you can play multiplayer against someone else. So now the public release will allow you to play anywhere in the world against anybody. Now, obviously, it's new. We're still trialing. We're still tweaking. So there's not as many people online yet. So there's the first goal. We want lots of people online, because the more people we get online, the more we can test it, the more we can have people playing each other randomly. But hey, if you and I want to play Cheech, and you might be over in Sydney like you do every month or so. All right, you're over there and you want to play me. We've put in a facility where you want to host a game, you'll get a code. You text me the code and I can choose to play you personally.
Easy.
So you know how often in games it's just some random person?
Correct.
We can select who we play if we know that person's online.
Yep.
All right. So, we've just added that facility. So we are constantly adding and tweaking. So that's on the go all the time. In addition to that, we have the school or the educational version. So it's the same app, but with tweaks. Now, a school version can only be played within that school. So we've met all the department privacy, security guidelines to protect the children.
It's got a lockdown version.
It's lockdown version. No student information gets collected. Yep. Those children, it's completely safe within their school.
Yep.
But they can play anyone in their class or anyone in their school. That is up to the teacher who they allow them to play. But teachers can monitor what they're doing. And what the app version is it allows them to play normally like you would with the cards. But it allows you to play in any situation. So if the kids are sitting outside on their iPods, it's a sunny day. You may not want to take the cards outside, but they can play on their iPads. All right, so they can still do that maths lesson, but do it digitally. But it also gives reinforcement. So when children are first learning, they make mistakes. So when you're watching them with cards, you can sit there and say, oh, hang on, you can't do that. That's breaking the rules. Oh, sorry, and they'll take the card back. All right. In the app won't allow them to do it. So the app is actually reinforcing the rules as well. So it is also a teaching tool. And it allows teachers to then look back on the game. They can see every move that a child's made. So there's a lot of that sort of thing with the teachers. It's slowly getting into our schools now, all right? And these schools have been giving me lots of feedback because obviously, as I say, we've been tweaking it. And I encourage any schools that want to get on there and trial it to talk to me about it, and we'll do it.
Absolutely.
But this is my goal, is to make this the next big thing. Because one thing that was made clear to me was this day and age, you got to go digital. Now, it was something Dad even talked about. And now he's been gone for 12 years. No, 13 years.
He started to understand.
He'd even understood that eventually it would need this.
Yeah.
And the publishing company I was with had looked at it and said, look, it's too expensive at the time. And I looked at it and I went, oh, my goodness, yes, it's too expensive, but hey, I've got to try. All right. So it's been a slow process. And everything I've earned in Numero has gone back into the app.
Yep.
So this is what I talk about that cash flow. It's tight again.
Yep.
But the goal is to make this digital app Numero of the future. And that is not to replace the cards, it's to complement them, because parents and school students and teachers, you still need the open conversation, the social interaction of playing a game with cards.
Something about the physicality of it, right? The tactile experience.
Yeah, that manipulative. You need to do things.
Yeah.
And it's that conversation, one of the things lacking in children today, and I mentioned it to you before, where they can tell you an answer but can't tell you how they got there.
Yeah.
When you're playing Numero, you have to say the maths you're doing.
Yeah.
So when you're playing the card version, they're saying it to their opponent because their opponent is checking the maths as they go along.
Correct.
So if I'm doing something, I'm saying it out loud, you're checking what I'm doing to make sure
that's
you
right.
agree with
That's
it.
fair.
Yeah. And if you don't, well, you're going to say, hang on, that doesn't add up. And I'm going to go back and check it.
Yeah.
And we have a discussion.
Yeah.
Well, teachers will tell you that the thing lacking in maths education at the moment is children's ability to discuss maths and to talk about it. All right. So Numero with the cards allows that.
Confidence to say, oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
So that's still a huge, important part of the game.
Got it.
But digital brings in the other side. All right. So when you can't be there to talk about them, there's the reinforcement. There's that one when a child's on their own.
Yeah.
Look, I've got a few schools where there's some special needs students who are much better on a digital platform. Those children now don't feel like they're isolated because they can play Numero.
They're part of this community now, right?
And so that gives another
Numero.
option. This also hopefully will introduce us overseas, because my next big step is I want Numero everywhere. And it's not for a financial reason. Hey, that's wonderful. You do want to make money, and you have to make money.
It's no crime.
Exist.
No crime to want to actually do better.
But it's not my goal. It's not my incentive. It's not the reason I do it. I firmly believe in what Numero does. And so because I believe in it, I've seen it with my kids. Their maths is exceptional. And their basic maths, number recognition into, 3, 4, 5-digit numbers, automatic calculations, is because of Numero. I want everyone to get that. I want people to see what it can do for them. And that I want around the world. I've got teachers from Perth that have gone back to Ireland, and it's those teachers that are actually bringing it into Ireland. And I'm talking to someone over there at the moment about how can we make it bigger, because I've already got half a dozen schools in Ireland that are playing it, but I want that to grow.
That's awesome.
And that's because of teachers from Perth that have gone back home to Ireland, Irish teachers that I've met here that have gone home. And so and that's the other thing, Numero has become a family because it's me and I deal directly with people.
Yeah.
It's a community within, my business is a community, and my name is everywhere. Like anybody can ring me because my number is everywhere.
So it's like synonymous with Numero.
Yeah. But people ring me and they know me. I consider them my friends. Yes, they started out as a customer, as a client, and they are still a client, but they're also a friend. A lot of them have become friends. A lot of them are still, colleagues, But I want Numero everywhere. My goal is to have Numero all through the East Coast, and I want it overseas. So I want it to be a worldwide. I have worldwide distribution rights. I want to take advantage of that, and I want Numero to grow.
Yeah.
So that's my next. So it's the app, getting the digital version out there, and getting Numero as a card game played everywhere. So there you go.
Well, you heard it here first, all right, listeners and viewers, right? Numero is going not just nationwide, but globally as well.
Please.
Well, look, that has been an amazing conversation, Julie. I think we ran for quite a long time already, so I'm just conscious of
I've probably wasted all your time.
No, absolutely not a waste at all. Like I think it was actually very, very insightful, and it was exactly what I wanted. Like,
Fabulous.
Your story being so unique, right? But also in a way very similar to what others are going through and potentially will go through. So really, thank you for opening up and just being so forthright and sharing.
Look, you're welcome. I love what I do. I believe in it, and that's what you got to do. Love it, believe in it, and go for it.
Absolutely. So, where can people find out more about Numero? So, point out the readers and viewers. So, where did they go?
The obvious place to start, the website. So, numero.org. So, ORG for organisation. So, numero.org.
Right.
Have a good look. There's stuff for families. There's stuff for aged care. There's stuff for schools. So, it fits every criteria there. And there's also some history on there as well, some endorsements and all of that. So you'll see all of that. There is also then my Facebook page. Now, I tell people to follow that. It's at Numero Australia, and that has videos and photos of all the different schools I go to. You see the work that I do. There's lots of videos about how to play. So there's all sorts of stuff to help you. I do have Instagram. It's also at Numero Australia.
Yep.
I'm on LinkedIn as Numero, Independent Education and Training, one or other. And everywhere you go, it will link you to one or other of those social media. And just know, and this is the big thing I say to everybody, any inquiry on the website, on the Facebook page, on wherever it is, any email, text message, general inquiry, phone call, comes to me. Tell me where you heard about me. Tell me where you came from. It all comes to me whether you like it or not. All right. So you're not dealing with a computer. You're not dealing with a call center.
Correct.
It's me. I answer every single message that comes through to my existence.
Well, there you go. Perfect. From the founder herself. So again, thank you so much for coming on. It has been amazing. Thank
you for having me.
And for all the readers and the viewers and listeners out there, right? I hope you really enjoyed it as much as I have, right? So thank you so much for joining us in this journey. And thank you so much for tuning into The Way with Cheech Foo. And I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks.